Isn't it revolting?
With a little help from his brothers, this acid-tongued comedian practically invented the phrase politically incorrect.
Say, Dream Girl, how'd you like to get in the movies?
Why, have you got any passes?
No, but I could make a few.
He could get away with all of that kind of little sexist things or whatever he said because, you know, he looked funny, he talked funny, he dressed funny.
Let me ask you something. What's he got that I haven't got?
Well, he's young, he's handsome, he's strong.
Stop. I withdraw the question.
Their explosive humor was of a very different nature. They wanted to be the naughty Jewish boys. And they became the darlings of New York society. They could do nothing wrong.
But behind Groucho's laughter lived a man who was insecure, misunderstood, and troubled.
No one quite understood Groucho, and he kind of felt maybe a little bit of rejection.
On this episode of Mysteries and Scandals, we'll reveal how the man who made America laugh couldn't find happiness in his personal life.
My father said there must be something wrong with me. He said every woman that I'm touched starts drinking.
We'll also examine how Groucho's in-your-face attitude got him into trouble on more than one occasion.
Louis Mayer had it in for them because Groucho didn't show him proper respect.
And we'll explore the vicious battles Groucho was forced to endure in his final days.
We put on a lot of evidence, a tremendous amount of horrible types of activities that they had observed in the house. Things that related to physical violence and abuse of Groucho.
Groucho once said, behind every successful man is a woman. Behind her is his wife. I'm A.J. Benza. Join me as we look past the women, the mustache, and the cigar, and at the man, Groucho Marx.
By 1977, Groucho Marx, the comedian who always managed a snappy comeback, was too frail to even manage his own affairs. The 86-year-old funny man became embroiled in a vicious battle between his 20-something companion, Aaron Fleming, and his son, Arthur Marx.
Well, she started to take over. She put in nothing but a group of spies in the house. So if ever I came over to see him, she'd know exactly what I talked to him about. And I couldn't even get to him to tell him what was happening.
At stake was an estate worth roughly $2 million, a hefty chunk of change that Fleming was anxious to get her mitts on. Biographer Stephen Canfor is the author of Groucho, The Life and Times of Julius Henry Marx.
The combination of the unstable woman and the old man with money got to everyone. It eventually got to her. Anybody who was involved in this could begin to see her take over in a shadowy way that I think made them all very nervous.
My wife, Lois, said to me, I sense there's going to be a lot of trouble with that girl. And there was a lot of trouble.
Unfortunately, this is one story that doesn't have a funny punchline. Film historian and biographer Joe Adamson.
His name was Julius Henry Marx when he was born in New York in 1890. He was actually the fourth one born, but the first one died in infancy. And he didn't quite take after the rest of the family. And the other members of the family were extroverts, party people, show people by nature. By nature, Groucho was more of an introvert.
Well, I tell you, I originally wanted to be a doctor. I had an uncle who was a comedian, and he was making $250 a week. And all the doctors I knew around that time were making around 18. So I decided to skip the Hippocratic Oath and get right into show business.
Groucho had a little help from his mother, Minnie, a former vaudeville entertainer who envisioned a life in showbiz for her boys. Biographer and friend Charlotte Chandler.
Minnie Marx told her sons, what other business is there in the world where people like us could go into it without education and make the great success? And she believed that was their answer.
The four Marx brothers, Groucho, Chico, Harpo, and Gummo, started out as a singing group. The only problem was the boys couldn't carry a tune.
They turned from a singing act into a comedy act. And they just simply started lampooning themselves and the audience and everything else. And for the first time, their jokes went over. And Groucho said about this, we really expected to be tarred and feathered and run out of town on a rail, and instead they all laughed.
Later, that was their Uncle Al said they can't go into big-time vaudeville with this little act, so he wrote them an act called Home Again. That's what started them on the road to big fame. And that's when Gummo left the act and went into the Army, and that's when Zeppo joined them.
So their explosive humor was of a very different nature, and they were used to the decorous quality of other acts. They couldn't believe their eyes. I mean, the stage was barely enough to contain these guys. They were really quite daring and unique. There was no one like them.
During the run of Home Again, Groucho added his signature cigar and mustache.
He would glue on this crepe mustache. And one night he got to the theater late, and there really wasn't time to apply this spirit gum to his face and glue on the mustache.
So I took some black grease paint that was laying there, and I went like that. And I went on the stage. And I noticed that the laughs were just the same as when I had the grown mustache on there.
The painted mustache remained Groucho's trademark, along with his love for pretty young girls. In 1920, Groucho fell in love with Zeppo's dancing partner, 18-year-old Ruth Johnson. The two were married, but it was no match made in heaven.
He was very strong, and she didn't have a great sense of humor. She rarely could get a straight line out of him.
What she did get out of him was a son, Arthur, born the following year. In 1923, the Marx Brothers made their Broadway debut in the musical I'll Say She Is.
This act, this I'll Say She Is. We went to New York with this act on Broadway, and it was strange the opening night. The audience literally threw their hats up in the air.
The show was a certifiable hit. The brothers got their first taste of fame, and Groucho became the group's unofficial frontman.
He was always the one who was always talking. He was always the one who was trying to get things on an even keel and get things organized.
Author Steve Stolier worked for Groucho Marx.
Groucho stood out over the other brothers in his quick sense of humor and also a physicality. Groucho early on became, in my opinion, the focus of the act, the main Marx brother.
Groucho's sarcastic ad-libs were a hit with audiences. Marx became a pioneer in the world of comedy, but like all trailblazers, Groucho had a share of rocky roads. Up next, Groucho Marx and his brothers split for Hollywood and then split for good. In 1929, the four Marx Brothers scored a 5-picture deal with Paramount Studios. The busy brothers shot movies by day and appeared on Broadway by night. And though Groucho had a knack for making people laugh, the quick-witted comic wasn't always a happy camper.
And no one quite understood Groucho, and he kind of felt maybe a little bit of rejection here. And playing Groucho, playing this character who could say anything and was not insecure, was a way for him to get more attention, more love, more laughs, more money than he could ever get as Julius Henry Marx.
Best-selling novelist Sidney Sheldon.
But I think one of the reasons that he got away with what he did was because people thought he was kidding, and he wasn't. When Groucho said something that was derogatory, he meant it.
Gee, thanks a lot for showing up. There's nothing in the world I wouldn't do for you.
There's nothing I wouldn't do for you. That makes two of us who do nothing for each other.
And Groucho, no doubt, had a few derogatory things to say when he lost his shirt in the stock market crash of 1929. Arthur Marx is the author of My Life with Groucho.
Right after the crash, he was so depressed I couldn't get him out of his dressing room and onto the stage. I finally had to push him out.
Groucho was hoping for a brighter future when the gang moved out to sunny California in 1931. In Hollywood, the Marx Brothers made 3 films: Monkey Business, Horse Feathers, and Duck Soup. Actor and comedian Richard Belzer.
Duck Soup is my favorite because it's a great anti-war movie, in addition to being a wild knockabout musical, but it's a satire of war. So anytime you can make people laugh and make fun of the institution of war, I think, you're way ahead of the game.
Unfortunately, Duck Soup laid an egg at the box office, and the Marx Brothers' goose was cooked at Paramount. Lucky for them, success was in the cards.
Chico played cards routinely with Irving Thalberg. One night at cards, Chico said, "Everybody says we're washed up. I don't think we're washed up yet." And Thalberg said, "I don't think you're washed up either. I think you're very funny." They sign up with Irving Thalberg, the biggest producer in Hollywood. They make A Night at the Opera, A Day at the Races, with tremendous hits, and they have a comeback. And then Irving Thalberg died.
After Irving Thalberg died in 1936, the quality of their films went down markedly, and one of the theories is because Louis Mayer had it in for them because Groucho didn't show him proper respect.
Louis B. Mayer hated Groucho because he once met him on the lot and said, "How are things going, Groucho?" And Groucho said, "I don't see that's any of your business." Well, of course, it was his business. MGM was his business, and he couldn't wait for the brothers to fail.
actress and comedian Judy Tenuta.
Louis B. Mayer was a big fat pig, and everybody hated him. So is it any wonder that, you know, he gave the Marx Brothers trouble? You can't have some big fat pig come in there just because he's got a jock strap and a chair and a desk to tell you how to do comedy. Yeah, that's wrong, Daddy.
Okay, Judy. Regardless of Mayer's animosity, Groucho Marx was ready to break out on his own. When we come back, Marx leaves his brothers and his wife, but you can bet your life he ain't through yet.
Hi, I'm Greg.
After filming The Big Store in 1941, the Marx Brothers went their separate ways. Groucho wanted to make it as a solo performer, and apparently his wife, Ruth, had the same idea.
Finally, the day came when she got her own place to live, and he walked her out to the car. And then he wrote me another letter. Dear Art, he says, your mother finally moved out today, and it was kind of an awkward moment for me. I didn't know what to say. So finally I stuck my hand out and said, Ruth, well, it's been nice knowing you. If you're ever in the neighborhood again, drop in.
In 1945, 54-year-old Groucho married 24-year-old Kay Gorsey. The following year, the Marx Brothers got back together for the film A Night in Casablanca, but Groucho had no plans to make the reunion permanent.
Groucho wanted to be a solo act, and it was just very hard for him to get along with even his brothers, but it was impossible for him to get along with anybody else.
Groucho was on his own for the 1947 film Copacabana, but the musical hit a sour note at the box office. That's when Marx made his mark on the radio.
It was a producer who said, how about if we do a game show, you be the host, you talk to the guests, you ad-lib, and then you ask a few questions at the end, and that's the game. He said, I will not do it. He finally did it.
You Bet Your Life hit the airwaves in 1947 before making the leap to the small screen.
When he went on TV in 1950, his career was kind of lagging, and all of a sudden he burst on this new medium of television. The thing that was great and revelatory about him was that he was a smartass, and it was sanctioned because it was on television.
Is it true that many girls become car hops in order to be noticed by movie producers?
Yes, I believe that is true.
Offhand, I'll bet there are more movie producers trying to get noticed by car hops.
Groucho's sardonic humor earned him the 1950 Emmy Award for Outstanding Television Personality, but Marx wasn't winning any awards at home. Groucho and second wife Kay were on the outs, and their daughter Melinda was caught in the middle. It seems Kay had a penchant for the sauce.
She started drinking. She started drinking so heavily, and she would take Melinda around in the car when she was a kid, and she was drinking and driving, and my father was afraid Melinda would get killed. My father got custody of Melinda, and then he actually sent Kay to a sanitarium.
The couple divorced in 1951. 3 years later, Groucho was at it again with wife number 3, 21-year-old Eden Hartford.
You know, Groucho liked arm candy, like most men. Groucho was, I think, very flattered by the fact that Eden Hartford was a beautiful woman and was interested in him. I think she may have been interested in him for many other reasons, but she was interested in his celebrity.
They got along okay, except she was sort of a dumbbell. She did start drinking. She finally realized this was a big mistake, his marriage, and so did he. One day my father said to me, there must be something wrong with me. He said, every woman that I'm touched starts drinking. And that was sort of a sad story. He was going through this terrible emotional period.
After You Bet Your Life was canceled in 1961, Groucho Marx was out of work and single at the age of 70, and the drama was just beginning. Straight ahead, Marx fights for his life, and his family fights for his dough.
They were the Line Entertainment's homepage.
In 1970, 80-year-old Groucho Marx was living a peaceful life at his home in Beverly Hills, but not for long. In need of an assistant to answer his fan mail, Groucho hired an aspiring actress, Erin Fleming, but the 29-year-old soon became more than just Groucho's secretary.
Erin Fleming was really one of those hangers-on that celebrities attract. Groucho told me, it was the first time I've really been with a woman who was good-looking and intelligent, and she really did admire him as living legend Groucho Marx.
Steve Stoliar was hired by Erin Fleming to work for Groucho in his house.
Gradually, her responsibilities grew to the point where she became his personal manager, and then beyond that was really making every important decision.
Groucho's family questioned Fleming's motives. Arthur Marx believed Erin was in the relationship for the money.
I wanted to make him, put him wise as to what she was trying to do. And he wouldn't believe it. He kept saying, she loves me. We all knew it wasn't true.
I'm older than she is. I think she's 28. But there's no difference in that. You know, I once said that a man is as old as the women he feels.
He wanted to please her, and he did pretty much what she wanted him to do. I think he stopped seeing some people that she didn't like because of that. And she was influential in that way.
Friend Charlotte Chandler.
There was that feeling that Groucho's life wasn't his life, that she was apparently, for many people, a gold digger because she was so much younger, and that he didn't have the right to go back to show business because he couldn't do it as well as before. But people were clamoring for it, and Carnegie Hall wanted him.
At the ripe old age of 81, Marx played the legendary New York Concert Hall in An Evening with Groucho. The packed house included actor Richard Belzer.
The reaction that he got, I think, it so imbued him with energy because he was slow and tired and old. And when that crowd just, it was really an amazing moment. And you could just see him get energy, literally, from the room.
Aaron Fleming tried to resuscitate Groucho's career. Marx made numerous TV appearances, and in 1973, the aging comedian received an honorary Oscar. Then Fleming began to bite the hand that was feeding her.
I saw numerous examples of Aaron's fury. There was clearly verbal and emotional abuse, and Aaron was given to screaming fits, slamming of doors, throwing things, but it would often have a very detrimental effect on Groucho, where if she threw a fit, he would end up shivering and crying, and it was heartbreaking to witness that.
In March of 1977, attorney J. Bryn Shulman filed a petition to have Arthur Marx appointed Groucho's personal conservator. The legal contest began.
A couple of private detectives had been retained by Miss Fleming to do some investigative or debugging, and that in their investigative efforts, they found a number of items in the storm drain outside of Groucho's house that included some 20-odd syringes, I believe, and some medicine vials, and they were very concerned with what these items were. They had Groucho's name on the bottles.
He went into Aaron and said, I just found this in the storm drain in front of the house. What should I do with it? And Aaron said, bury it in the backyard. So the detective, to his credit, took it to the Beverly Hills police, who ran tests on the drugs and found that there were traces of barbiturates left in the syringe.
We put on a lot of evidence. Nurses, a cook, I think the housekeeper, all who testified to things that related to physical violence and abuse of Groucho by Aaron Fleming.
A judge decided to appoint a third party, Groucho's grandson, Andy Marx, as conservator during the conflict. While Aaron and Arthur were duking it out in court, Groucho was in Cedars-Sinai battling pneumonia.
I just left the hospital. I got a call from Andy. He said, you better come back. Your father's blood pressure is getting low and they can't raise it. So that was the end. We went over and he was lying in bed, practically unconscious by then. And we went over and I held his hand and he died.
Julius Henry Groucho Marx was 86. His body was cremated and his ashes were interred in the San Fernando Valley. But the controversy over his estate lingered on.
After Groucho died, the Bank of America then became the executor of his estate. So seeking to essentially recover money and property and to cancel some contracts that had been entered into between Aaron Fleming and Groucho Marx.
Aaron was her own worst enemy because the jurors felt she had something to hide. She had undergone psychiatric examinations and she was clinically labeled, mentally disturbed.
In the end, Aaron Fleming lost the fight and walked away with nothing.
But the real tragedy about it, Groucho, is all this happened to a man who was a funny person, who made us all laugh.
Hold me closer, closer, closer.
If I hold you any closer, I'll be in back of you.
And it's very sad that there was times that he had to stop laughing.
I loved him a lot, and I always will. I always remember the good times I had with him, how much fun he was. and how he tried to help me. And what a really good father he was, because he was conscientious about that.
When Groucho died, it was a terrible loss. Very few people have the nerve to be so openly anti-establishment. And he said anything that came into his mind. And he said it in such a way that people accepted it and thought it was either funny or brilliant or both.
Groucho Marx should be remembered as a brilliantly inventive, funny, bright, wonderful presence. Cinema, television, stage. He really was just a totally unique, original creation.
Groucho once said, the secret of success is honesty and fair dealing. If you can fake those, you got it made. How are you going to beat a guy like that? I'm A.J. Benza. Join me the next time we take a stroll down the flip side of the Walk of Fame.
And my father wanted to join this ritzy beach club. My father said he'd like an application, and the man said, well, I'm sorry, we can't accept you because you're Jewish. And my father looked at the manager and said, well, how about my son? He's only half Jewish. Can he go in the water up to his knees? We never got in the club.